Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, November 8th to order. Evening, Council, and welcome those in the audience.
This is on. Oh yeah.
Hello?
It's on. I guess.
Is it on? Can you hear me in the back?
Oh.
Good. All right. I'll start over. Good evening. Welcome to council meeting. Call a regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, November 8th to order. And it's my honor to read some proclamations to start our meeting. Hey, Sam. First proclamation is for Small Business Saturday. Whereas the City of Ames celebrates our local small businesses and the contribution they make to our local economy and community, and whereas 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community. And whereas the City of Ames supports our local small businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our neighborhoods, and whereas advocacy groups and public and private organizations in the state of Iowa and across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Therefore, I, John A. Halen, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 26, 2022, as Small Business Saturday in Ames, and ask that all residents in our community support our local small businesses and merchants on that day and throughout the year with their patronage. I'm happy to present this to Sarah. And do you have a few comments to make?
Just a few.
All right.
I promise I'll keep it short. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Dvorsky, and I'm proud to serve as Executive Director for Ames Main Street. I'm here tonight with our Board Chair, Sam Stagg. We're very excited to be here and have the support of the Ames City Council and the Ames community. Downtown Ames is home to over 200 businesses, retail, service, restaurant, and many more. By supporting a small business in downtown Ames, 52 to 70 cents of every dollar goes back into the local economy. While Small Business Saturday is just one day a year, we encourage everyone to shop small, shop local, and shop the Ames community all year round. To learn more about Ames Main Street, the businesses in our district, and what we are doing, please visit amesdowntown.org. We hope to see you in downtown Ames soon, but especially on Small Business Saturday, November 26th.
All right. Next, I have invite Melinda Thatch to join me. World Pancreatic Cancer Day. Whereas in 2022, an estimated 62,210 people will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the United States, and 49,830 will die from the disease. And whereas pancreatic cancer is one of the deadliest cancers, is currently the third leading cause of cancer death in the United States, and is projected to become the second leading cause around 2030. And whereas pancreatic cancer is the only major cancer with a 5-year relative survival rate of just 11%. And whereas when symptoms of pancreatic cancer present themselves, it is generally in later stages, and only 10% of pancreatic cancer patients are diagnosed when the disease is confined to their pancreas. And 91% of the pancreatic cancer patients die within the first 5 years. And whereas approximately 520 deaths will occur in Iowa in 2022, and whereas pancreatic cancer is the 7th most common cause of cancer-related deaths across the world, and whereas the good health and well-being of the residents of Ames are enhanced as a direct result of increased awareness about the symptoms and risk of pancreatic cancer and research into the early detection, causes, and effective treatments. Therefore, I, John A. Hale, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim November 17th, 2022 as World Pancreatic Cancer Day in the City of Ames. Say a few words.
Hi, I'm here because I got involved because in November 10 years ago, at this time, I had no idea what pancreatic cancer was. And on November 19th, my mom heard those words, "You have advanced stage metastatic pancreatic cancer and 50-50 chance of living until Christmas." And she died 13 days later. So I became a volunteer, and part of what I do is raise awareness of the vague symptoms of pancreatic cancer and encourage people, if they have any of these, to contact their doctor or to contact Pancreatic Cancer Action Network Patient Central for more information on how they could be treated. So the risk factors are the same as for a lot of other cancers. If you're overweight, if you have a poor diet, you don't exercise, but the symptoms are really vague, and they can be a lot of other things. If you have pain in your stomach or in your back, because your pancreas kind of runs front to back in the middle. If you have a change in stool, people don't really like to talk about their poop, but if you change from having regular sinkers to floaters or oily or stinky, those are the kinds of changes that can be indicated by something going on with your pancreas. If you have early onset of diabetes, that sudden onset of diabetes with the numbers that are really high, especially after age 50, that can be a sign and a symptom. And jaundice is one that a lot of people have, but that's one that my mom didn't have literally until the day before she died. So there's just a lot of things that you can look for, and these are things that are vague. But if you have 2 or more of those symptoms, or a family member who's had it, please ask your doctor for help about it. There's currently no early detection method for it. And like was in the proclamation, it is the 3rd leading cause of cancer-related death now, and it is projected to become the 2nd by 2030.
All right, Charlie Weber and Gina Perkins, are you able to join me up here? Hi. Okay. City of Ames Philanthropic Day. Whereas the Story County Alliance for Philanthropy has created awareness of philanthropy efforts in Ames and Story County for 17 years, and whereas philanthropy can have many definitions, including adult and youth individuals, families, groups, and businesses that volunteer and donate time, effort, leadership skills, knowledge, property, or money to actively promote human welfare to improve quality of life. And whereas there are many organizations committed to creating awareness of and providing recognition of philanthropy in Ames, and whereas throughout the month of November, as part of National Philanthropy Month, the Story County Alliance for Philanthropy recognizes outstanding adult and youth individuals, families, groups, and businesses in Ames who have exhibited outstanding financial or leadership support for many charitable causes. And whereas annual award categories include individual family, philanthropist, business, corporate foundation philanthropist, group philanthropist, individual fundraiser, and youth group fundraiser. Therefore, I, John A. Hale, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim November 17, 2022, the City of Ames Philanthropy Day. I encourage all members of our community to recognize the many philanthropic efforts of our citizens. You want to say something?
Good evening. I'm Gina Perkins with Cultivating Hope Farms, recognizing and thanking you guys for recognizing the really hard word of philanthropy, which I sometimes can't say. So I'd like to introduce Charlie.
Thank you. Charlie Weber with Good Neighbor Emergency Assistance, which is financial assistance for low income, rent, utilities, transportation, and food in Story County. I'm going to give you 6 numbers. This Philanthropy Day luncheon, November 17th, is going to be the 17th year that we've done this. We have 5 different award winners that we'll recognize this year. So doing the math, that's over 85 different acts of philanthropy that have been recognized for their contributions to the community in both Ames and in Story County. Uh, There are, as Gina mentioned, she's with Cultivating Hope Farms. I'm with Good Neighbor Emergency Assistance. There's 16 different nonprofits that make up the alliance and work to recognize these winners each year. There's also 18 community sponsors, and those 18 are primarily businesses, some individuals, but again, people that want to, in the community, help recognize philanthropy. If you want more information, you can go to storycountyalliance.org, or you can call United Way of Story County, and that phone number is 515-268-5142. We appreciate the City of Ames allowing us to take some time to create awareness of philanthropy in Ames. Thank you.
I have one more, but I left it in the folder. I'll be right back. All right, I'd like to invite Linda Munden, Kathy Pinkerton, Emily Randall, Aaron Brewerts, and there's some representatives from Access also here. Join me up here. And Vanessa. National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week 2022. Whereas for the past 29 years, the National Coalition for the Homeless and the National Student Campaign Against Hunger and Homelessness has sponsored National Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week. And whereas the purpose of the proclamation is to educate the public about the many reasons people are hungry and homeless, including the shortage of affordable housing in Ames for very low income residents, and to encourage support for homeless assistance service providers, as well as community service opportunities for students and school service organizations. And whereas there are many organizations committed to sheltering and providing supportive services, as well as meals and food supplies to the homeless, which includes but not limited to Assault Care Center Extending Shelter and Support, also known as Access, the Bridge Home, Food at First, Good Neighbor Emergency Assistance, Mid-Iowa Community Action, also known as MICA, Story County Community Services, the Hunger Collaboration, the Salvation Army, Veterans Affairs, and Youth and Shelter Services, and various area churches and food pantries. And whereas the focus of the National Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week 2022 continues to volunteer, donate, and educate. And whereas the City of Ames recognizes that hunger and hopelessness continue to be serious problems for many individuals and families in Ames. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim November 13th and 19th, 2022 as National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. On behalf of our community, I encourage all citizens to recognize that many people do not have housing and need support from citizens and private, public, nonprofit service entities. Are you going to share some words?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Actually, I'm going to let the mic go to the agencies that the city supports to get these efforts out in our community. So I'll give them the opportunity to share.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm stepping in for my coworker Annika. So on behalf of United Way of Story County and the Story County Hunger Collaboration, I would like to thank the City of Ames for its proclamation. Food insecurity in our community continues to be a real and pressing issue. In the 2021-22 school year, for example, 28% of Ames students were eligible for free or reduced priced lunch. Since pandemic expended benefits ended in April, local food pantries have seen a large increase in visitors. In June 2022, more than 5,000 individuals were served in the 20-plus food pantries in Story County. In August 2022, more than 3,500 individuals were served at 4 Ames community pantries alone, and an additional 675 individuals were served at the SHOP food pantry on the ISU campus. So thanks again for helping raise awareness about hunger and homelessness in our community.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to consent. Does any council, do you want to pull any items from consent tonight?
I'd like to pull item 18.
Okay, 18.
And number 5, please.
All right, number 5. Anything else? Entertain a motion to approve consent less items 5 and 18.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Anita, you pulled number 5, the motion approving payment of claims.
Yeah, I wondered if Deb would be willing to come up. I did see that the Bridge Home, who we just recognized, was on there as having received a recent payment, which I imagine is through our giving. And so just wanted to get an update on where we are with that program and
Yep.
our assessments and things.
Yep, sure. Good evening, everyone. So we have a contract in place, so between the city and the Bridge Home for the current fiscal year for 3 services: emergency shelter, emergency basic needs, which is rent and utility assistance, and then transitional living services. And during the asset joint funders meeting in September, a question came up from that meeting about whether or not the Bridge Home was providing transitional living services, because a comment had been made that they weren't. And it's in our contract. And so we pursued that conversation with Jody Stumbo, the CEO and president of the Bridge Home. And they are providing the service yet this fiscal year. The city's amount or allocation towards that service is $31,921 for the fiscal year. They drew all of those dollars down in July and August, which is typical. That's not an unusual thing to have happen. So they're serving about 4 families, and they'll continue providing the service through the end of the fiscal year. Then they are phasing it out. And so in fiscal year 24, they will not be asking for funding for that service. What's replacing it and what has gotten kind of confusing over the course of time, but I think we're getting it straightened out, is they're replacing it with a service called permanent supportive housing. So it's similar in some aspects, but there are some different qualifying criteria that people have to meet in order to access that service. But they did come to Asset this summer and made a request for a new and expanded service. So that was included in their asset budget for fiscal year 24. And so that will be part of the discussion that the asset volunteers will have coming up in January when they go through the allocation process. That information will be presented to all of you at the budget issues session in December. So you'll have a chance to hear about it as well. But I think overall, yeah, I think things are going better, and they're following the terms of our contract. Like any agency who's drawing down funds from the city through the asset process, they provide an invoice the month after the services have been provided, and then they provide client information and units of service provided, and that's then the amount that they draw down for that month for all of those services. They have also expanded shelter beds by about 12 beds. However, they are looking for funding and other sources of donations to be able to hire staff to staff those additional beds. So that's in the works.
Okay. Thanks for that update.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then I move approval of item 5.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Rachel.
So on item 18, I just didn't see a signed agreement, so I wanted to kind of check on the status of that.
Yeah, thank you. The agreement from the Union Pacific Railroad has not come in yet. Our project engineer spoke with the UP representative this afternoon, and the UP said they will have the agreement to us by Friday. So council could choose to approve this agreement contingent upon receiving the agreement and then review by the city attorney's office. And then we would have that available for the mayor to sign next week, and that would enable the project to keep moving forward.
John, is it clear to us when we agree to pay for future maintenance of that crossing, whether we are doing the work or whether UP is doing the work and we are reimbursing them?
They require that their own staff do any work adjacent or between the rails.
I appreciate you pulling this. This is one of those projects that I've been lobbying for forever, and city staff has done yeoman's work trying to get Union Pacific off the fence to respond to us. And so exciting for people in that area to have that completed sidewalk. So thank you for your work on that, John.
Is there a motion?
I would move approval contingent upon receipt of the UP agreement.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to public forum. This is a time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And I would ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And is there anyone who wants to address council under public forum? Seeing none, we'll close public forum and we'll move on to item number 29. Roger?
This morning, the city took bids on our Series 2022A general obligation bonds. I'm happy to say we had a high demand for these bonds and some really good rates. And I have with me tonight Susan Gerlach from PFM. She's going to give you all the great details.
Thank you, Roger. So a competitive sale, our goal is 3 bids. Today, the city received 13 bids. So that's what Roger means by demand. That's an excellent day in the market. Unfortunately, rates are not what they were a year ago. So we got the best available rate in the market today. Of the 13 bids, the first 12 bids were within 12 basis points of each other, or 0.12% of each other. And the TIC range, the true interest cost, that's that aggregated interest rate for all 12 years of the bonds. The range is 3.64% to 3.91%. That last place bid being a little bit of an outlier. That was a regional bank from Omaha. The winning bid came from Janie Montgomery Scott in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at 364. And that second place bid that we call the cover bid came from Fifth Third Securities out of Cincinnati, Ohio at 3.65%. So as I've said in the past, the closer those numbers are together, the higher the demand and the higher the competitiveness to win today. So, and in the sale process, Moody's Investor Service did affirm the city's strong AA1 rating. That is continuing to serve the city well. And these bonds will be used to fund the FY23 CIP, and it will be paid for by the debt service levy. So we did restructure today to match the city's tax rate with a pre-levy that was approved in your budget for the 23 payment, and then did level debt service thereafter. So does anybody have any questions?
If just 2 little ones. So a year ago, what would approximately this bond have been?
1%.
Yeah. And so this gives us sort of a sense of the trajectory and the difference of our borrowing power.
Mhm.
And then a final question. If as a city, we were to increase our spending so that we're getting closer to the 810 limit, how does that affect the desirability of our bonds in the market?
So the tax rate, ironically, is not part of the scorecard metric.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is your surplus deficit. If you're drawing down cash, if you're building cash reserves, your cash reserves is a very significant 30% is your finances. So it's not necessarily the tax rate. It is how you're budgeting versus how you're performing. That's much more important to the rating agencies, which is interesting. I
I
know.
don't think I've ever known that. So thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Roger. We'll open up public input. Does anyone want to address council on this item tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Entertain a motion on authorizing and approving a loan agreement providing for the sale of issuance of a bonds not to exceed $13,400,000 of general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2022A, and providing for the levy of taxes to pay same.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 30, Ames Municipal Airport renaming. Damien.
Good evening. So tonight, really, this is the last step in renaming the airport. One of the things that maybe I would highlight is that if council moves forward with the renaming under alternative 1, that the signage changing the front and the back of the terminal building and the sign up by Airport Road will come out of council contingency. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Questions for Damien? Appears not. All right, discussion?
So I'll be voting no on this tonight, and not to go over those reasons the same degree as in the prior meeting. But I think it's important when you're dissenting on important issues to explain why. And what I'd like to focus on is what we could have done differently. I am not dissenting on this because I have any opposition towards Mr. Banning himself. Frankly, it was very interesting to learn about Mr. Banning. My concern is that the process was not inclusive. We talk extensively about the importance of doing things in a way that's inclusive in this community. And so in the process of getting community input on the one name that we provided, we learned about 3 other people that also had significant contributions to the airport in Ames. One of them spent decades improving the airport and had a very impressive personal narrative, World War II veteran and prisoner of war during World War II. And we received many emails, but we didn't have a chance to really consider those because the process was from the very beginning only looking at one candidate. And so I think it's important that as we do things in the future, we try to avoid a process that is limited to just one name, and that we would give a full consideration to others. And that's why I'm dissenting on tonight's vote. Thanks.
Okay. Open up public input. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Any further discussion? Or are you ready for a motion?
I would move alternative 1, A and B.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any closing discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Move on to item number 31, naming in the downtown plaza. There's a memo, council, that's included in the packet. Do you have any questions or further comments on the resolution? All right. Open up public input. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on naming the downtown plaza for Stephen L. Shanker? Seeing none, we'll close public input and entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Very good. Moving on to item number 32. Chief Huff.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to discuss the liquor license renewal for Neighborhood Liquor and Smokes located at 3505 Lincoln Way, Suite number 105. They're currently applied for renewal of their Class E, Class B, Class C, carry out, and Sunday sales privilege license. And as you know, these licenses must be approved by the local authority or the city council. As you also know, the police department conducts compliance checks on liquor license establishments. It's a pretty routine thing that we do. The compliance checks are completed by taking an underage person to these premises and simply determining whether or not alcohol is sold to them underage. The person that we choose has an ID with them, and it's their ID that shows that they're underage. So if they are asked to provide ID, they do that, and they should be able to determine that they're underage by looking at that if they ask. We conducted one of these compliance checks on Neighborhood Liquor and Smokes on March 26th of 2021, and the employee did sell to the underage person. We conducted another compliance check about a year later on February 11th, 2022, and again, an employee sold alcohol to a minor underage. A few months later in May, the Iowa Alcoholic Beverage Division suspended their license for 30 days and also fined them $1,500, which is prescribed in Iowa code. So it's not a choice that they make, it's simply codified. We did a follow-up compliance check on October 20th of 2022, just a month ago. Again, an employee sold alcohol to a minor. So this is the third violation within 3 years of a failed compliance check. And again, Iowa code prescribes a 60-day suspension this time and another fine of $1,500. Now, that's not happened yet because it normally takes a little bit of time. They wait to let the citation go through the court process first. So we're waiting on that. In addition to that, we've actually received a number of complaints, especially from parents, complaining that their underage children have been purchasing alcohol, tobacco, and vaping products from this business. We've not been able to substantiate each one of those complaints, but it certainly corroborates the evidence that we have that they failed 3 compliance checks. In the event that you deny the requested license renewal, the denial can be appealed. So the first appeal goes to ABD, then to an administrative law judge, then to the director of ABD, and then finally to district court if they take it that far. If the appeals are not successful, alcohol may not be sold on the premise for 1 year or until a new license is applied for by a new owner or manager. So you have a number of alternatives that we've provided to you. The first would be to deny the application for a 12-month liquor license renewal. If approved, the establishment would still be subject to the fine by the state of Iowa, so that $1,500 fine that's in holding pattern. You could approve the application for a 12-month liquor license renewal. And again, if this is approved, the establishment will still be subject to the 60-day suspension and the $1,500 fine. Or you could deny the application for a 12-month renewal, but entertain a future application for a 6-month renewal should that come before the council. And again, in this case, the 60-day suspension would still happen along with the fine. After careful consideration, my recommendation was to not renew the license based on the failure of 3 compliance checks within 3 years, and also taking into consideration the number of complaints that we've had of this establishment. It's very concerning. The compliance checks are pretty simple to pass. It's simply asking for an ID, identifying that ID as being of age or underage, and making a decision to not sell to underage people. Entertain any questions if you have them.
Questions for Chief?
Chief, you've done a nice job of laying this out, but I would like to know, have you had a chance to visit with the folks who run this, and do you have a sense that they are taking this seriously, and are there some remedial measures or training that they've undertaken that might be important for us to know about?
I was hoping that I don't know if there is someone to speak, so I think it's probably a better question for them on what steps they've taken after failing 3 compliance checks.
But I agree with you. I'd like to hear from them. But from your perspective, have they communicated with you any remedial steps? And again, I'm thinking about training or increased supervision. I'm not sure what steps, but Have they communicated those to you?
No, not to me. My understanding is they do have electronic machine that you can read a license. I don't know if they're using it or not. That would be a pretty simple fix, though. But they'll have to tell you.
And in other, this is not our first rodeo.
Right.
So when we've had other situations, we've had alcohol compliance. There's been an expectation that we work with the establishment and try to right the ship.
Right.
Could you talk to the council about what are the things that normally you expect to see from someone that we're trying to move into compliance?
So ABD, Alcoholic Beverage Division, does have online training that anyone can take to learn, the ins and outs of checking IDs and making sure you're in compliance with the law. We also have offered ID check classes. Normally, we have this issue with bars, and it's a little bit different situation with the number of people and the number of employees. This is kind of a smaller scale, but we do try and work with them to figure out why they're not in compliance. But I still go back to, this is a simple process, asking for an ID, checking that ID, and it's a failure to do so.
Right. I understand it's a failure, but I'm just trying to think of, are there remedial things that we can do? And so, but that's been helpful. Thank you very much.
So we've had a couple of these where we denied the 12-month and recommended the 6-month. Could you explain what's maybe different about this case or more severe that you're recommending just denying the license instead of recommending the 6-month?
Good question.
Yeah, I can't remember a time when we had a business fail 3 compliance checks within 3 years. And on top of that, I also don't remember a time we've had so many complaints from parents that are concerned about their underage children being able to purchase alcohol and tobacco and vaping products. So I think for me, that's probably those 2 things combined. It would be hard for me to recommend a renewal based on those.
Okay.
Part of my job is also to help ensure that underage people are not in possession of and being sold alcohol and tobacco products underage.
Other questions? All right. We'll open up public input, and I have 2 cards, and we'll invite Carrie Orr to introduce yourself and your address, and you may address council.
Do I have to say my address?
Yeah.
I'm Carrie Orr. I live at 4412 Castlewood Place, Apartment 3 here in Ames, Iowa.
Thank you.
I am an employee at Neighborhood Liquor, and I understand the concerns of the council. I am here as a current employee because I have the same goal: no underage sales. We have worked hard over the last 6 months to put steps in and work to provide every employee with the proper training and resources to ensure that the law of Iowa is being followed. Every employee must take the impact training, and we have added several signs throughout the store asking customers to have their IDs ready. We also added an ID scanner. I feel like these are just the beginning of the changes at Neighborhood Liquor. I would love to see more changes happening on both sides. I would love to see, along with these stings, that we have some continuous training between Ames PD and the retailers, classes, brochures, things that we have not been offered. Nobody has come to us to talk to us about how to make this not happen. My goal is to keep kids off tobacco and alcohol. I would like the city to also consider an ordinance of any retailer that has 80% of their profit being made by alcohol and tobacco, that it be required that you be 21 to enter that establishment. As an employee of this establishment, yes, there are young people. There are a lot of fake IDs. Even this scanner, there are faults to everything. The individual that made the 2 first sales, I will say he was a bad seed, a very bad seed. And I can't say anything else about him. This last sale, it was a simple mistake. He read the ID wrong. He had no malicious, no intent at all. He really didn't. And I honestly believe that. I myself, I ID everyone that walks in there. I've only been there 6 months, but like I said, in the last 6 months, a lot of changes have happened. And I believe that Hamza should be allowed to continue to make the changes. And we ask that the city work with us to help us, to educate us. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Brita Voss.
Hi, Brietta Voss, 4801 Idaho Circle. Thank you, members of the Ames City Council, for allowing me to speak. I'm speaking to you tonight as a very concerned Ames community member and most importantly as a parent. Our son, along with many other underage children, have found that they can purchase alcohol, vapes, and vape pods from the neighborhood liquor mart without ever being carded. The store's negligence to follow the law has provided an opportunity for my son to purchase illegal items at the age of 17 at his own free will as late as September 17th, 2022, and then resell those items to all of his friends and use them for his own vice. This habit has led to an addiction to both nicotine and alcohol and has recently resulted in him having to be placed in rehab. It was brought to our attention while he was in rehab that the neighborhood liquor mart regularly sold to him without ever asking for an ID. We have bank statements showing purchases on his debit card to the store for large amounts of money. They have become my son's and many other teenagers' drug dealer. The choice of drug is alcohol and nicotine. If someone deals drugs, they go to jail, and I see this as no different than what is happening today with the employees at this establishment. They need to be held accountable for these actions. Do not renew their liquor license. They need to be shut down so they can no longer harm our young people who have fallen prey to their negligent, greedy behavior of only caring about the money they make and not the long-term effects of these young people or caring for what the law says. Obviously, they don't care about the law with the little slap on their wrist that they previously had. It is noted that this establishment, as Commander Huff said, has been cited numerous occasions. It obviously wasn't enough because my son purchased from them illegally the exact week they got their liquor license back in June. My husband brought a picture of our son into the store to alert them to not sell to this minor. We tried to return alcohol that had been purchased on his debit card, illegally by our son. My husband was cussed and sworn at and said to go effing call the police. We don't care. Members of the council, this is not the type of establishment that our community members need or want. It does nothing for the image of Ames or its citizens who want to keep this kind of riffraff out of our community and surrounding ones as well. It is also known to be teenagers around other school districts like Ballard and Gilbert know far too well that they can also purchase items from this store. Word has gotten around. Running a police sting will not stop this from happening because they have learned who their clientele is and know they're not there for the sting. These kids are not even using fake IDs. No parent should have to pay $65,000 for their child to be admitted to rehab at the age of 17 because the access to their drug is being accessed with such ease. Not one time, not two times, but rather weekly and daily purchases. This has to stop. You are the only ones who have the power to stop these minors from continuing to have access to this horrific place by shutting down their license. I can't stop my son, and neither can his recent skills from rehab. If it is so easily available, they will continue to help them sabotage his sobriety. If my son can be strong enough to not enter their store and fuel his addiction, I know there are many other children out there who will not have their parents' support or rehab skills to stop them. Would you want this for your son, grandson, neighbor, or friend? Ames is better than this. Please shut them down for good. There are plenty of other establishments within Ames that sell liquor and nicotine who follow the rules and are not above the law for those folks who choose to purchase these items. These folks do not need Neighborhood Liquor Mart, and neither does Ames. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Hamza Feroz, and I'm the Vice President of Neighborhood Liquor Mart. So today I have a bunch of information that basically proves that, well, basically at our store, we require that every employee takes the IPACT, which is a training course put out there by the Iowa ABD. and it teaches a potential employee about the risks of selling alcohol and tobacco. Or it. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Employees about the risk of selling alcohol, and we make sure that they're certified and they have a certificate in hand. So recently, we had a one of those compliance checks occur at our store, and I do have his actual certificate in hand, which is proof that he had taken the class, but he had recently taken it. Let's see. Previously, we had a system that was primarily run on our phones, which was basically the Iowa ABD app. You basically scan their ID, and it tells you whether it's fake or not, or if they are of age. We noticed that the Iowa ABD one was not sufficient. It took way too long. We advocated to use the Missouri compliance one because it had the same setup. Everything was entirely the same, but it was a little bit quicker. The camera system was a little bit faster. Our first offense was about 2 whole years ago, and we that was an honest mistake. We generally we had just opened up. We hadn't received anything that was like this sort of information that was helpful, and basically told us, aside from it is 21 and like IDs are necessary, we really didn't have any other way of understanding how to tell what a fake ID looks like as opposed to a real one. Basically, this never occurred again until I believe February or March of this year, where one of my employees who was terminated the day of, he basically, I had terminated him because of acts that he had done, and as well as what he was doing at the store, and he told me that just let me finish out my my last shift tonight, and it happened to be the one where he got cited. Basically, based on that, I'm led to believe that this may have been intentional to get back at me as an employer for terminating him, since then we've suffered the consequences for this. We've lost quite a bit of sales during the month where we were not able to sell any alcohol, which was May 15th through June 14th, 2022. Since then, we have implicated a new system where not everyone has their phone with them at all times. We want to make sure that they are IDing. So we decided that we were going to implement a new system, which has it checks for IDs, it checks and make sure that they are of legal age, and I have information on our scanner as well that basically just proves how many IDs we've gone through, how many IDs and date of birth we've looked into, and it actually provides us with a little bit more information to the level of how many times we've scanned a specific person's ID and how many like underage ones that we've seen. So we basically are able to see like which ones are underage and which ones are not. And I do have that information along with me. If anyone needs any of this information, I do have it present here. I have personally spoken to the officers that work under the Department of Administration for this for the compliance checks, and basically they were the ones that actually told us that the store next door does a pretty good job with their ID catching and everything. It'd be a good idea to implement these scanners. So initially, we started out with the mobile phone scanner, which proved to not be as helpful, I guess, in that situation. So we decided to move towards a actual like one that's going to be there at the store and is used for every single customer that we ever bring in, or every patron that ever comes into the store. I also conveyed these same sentiments to the Lieutenant Chief of Ames PD about a week ago, that we are working really hard and trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We genuinely do not want children on the streets to have access to anything along the lines of alcohol or tobacco. And the most recent mistake at hand is a brand new employee. He made a mistake, and genuinely he got flustered because it was one of his first few days of working, and the worst case scenario did happen to him. All we ask is the opportunity that we can ensure that this doesn't happen again, because we generally have worked very hard here and have the intention of providing the youth of today to not have access to alcohol or tobacco. I would like to add another great method of making sure that this doesn't occur again is maybe providing some sort of instruction in person to the business. Then that would be nice, and make sure that, like, even for like new businesses that apply for a license, they should be told to go through the system. The IPAC wasn't brought up until at least our first or second offense, and I do believe that if we were to have that information present, then we would be able to, or they would have been able to make the correct decision. And that is all.
Thank you. Mayor, can I have we'll leave it for just a few questions. Promise to keep it brief.
Please.
So, sir, this is a pretty bold comment on your part tonight to not even acknowledge the comments of Ms. Voss. And maybe that was an oversight on your part, but do you have any response to Ms. Voss?
I am genuinely sorry. I actually have no idea like this was occurring. We've basically tried to make sure that we stay on IDing people from day one, and like I've never had like this type of thing happen, at least to like when I'm working. But I mean, I can't attest for everyone like that was working at that time when this did occur.
That's fine.
I'm just a little nervous. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm fine. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public input.
I'm normally pretty open to trying a suspension period, like we try 6 months and see how it goes. And that's been our pattern in the past. But this was pretty appalling. And Ms. Voss, I am sorry for what you and your family are having to go through. You are not alone in having a son who has struggled with alcohol and drugs. It is a huge problem in our Ames schools. And we need to talk more about it. And where we have a business who is profiting off of the vulnerability of our children, we need to take notice of that. So, and I am baffled by the lack of understanding as a store owner. We gave you ample time tonight to talk about your response, and I had to ask you to respond to Ms. Voss. That's bold. That's bold.
All right.
And so, this statement is important. So it's important that we communicate clearly because other businesses are watching. So I'm going to move in consistent with the staff recommendation of alternative number 1.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 And just for the record, alternative 1 is
Deny the application for a 12-month liquor license renewal.
thank you. All right. Moving on to item number 33, staff report on downtown URA criteria.
Kelly.
Kelly?
Brian. Should we just skip it and come back?
He's right there.
Oh.
Yeah,
Kelly?
Kelly's here.
Kelly was taking a nap. I apologize.
He was pulling up his PowerPoint. He was pulling up
saw
his
that there.
PowerPoint. Yeah.
He was sleeping.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
Sorry for bullying you, Kelly.
I'm used to it. So for this item, we're here in response to a referral from City Council to discuss urban revitalization area for the downtown. Urban revitalization areas are a mechanism that the state of Iowa allows for city councils to have a couple of different powers, but the one that we most commonly use is the ability to grant tax abatement as an incentive for particular activities. So downtown has had an urban revite area for over 20 years, and we do have a tax abatement program that is keyed to the goals and objectives of our downtown facade program at the same time. So City Council back in, I think, 2001, recreated a downtown urban revite area and also created a downtown facade program and adopted design guidelines that are focused on improving the exterior facades of buildings along Main Street or their front facades. That's the goal of the program. And a project that increases value of that building is also able to take advantage of tax abatement on a 3-year schedule. And if you've been around for a while, there's 3 kinds of schedules you can have for abatement: a 3-year 100%, a sliding scale over 5 years, or a sliding scale over 10 years. And in the report, we talk about kind of the relative values of those things. They're a little different. It's up to an owner to pick which one they prefer, and that stays in place then for the life of that schedule. In downtown, council established only a 3-year 100% abatement schedule rather than allow for the longer periods of abatement. Our records don't really explain why that was the choice. I think I hypothesize that it's really because generally the value of the projects in downtown are quite small. Some of the bigger projects we've seen in Campus Town are multi-million-dollar improvements with large tax bills, and they've taken advantage of longer schedules. We have not seen large redevelopment projects in downtown. They're much smaller rehabilitation projects or repurposing of existing buildings, and then also using facade improvements as part of that process. So we've been using that program for 20 years. There's actually been very few tax abatement requests in that time period, but we have had dozens of facade grants given out, which illustrates that just doing facade work does not increase the taxable value of your building just because you make that work to improve the integrity of your building. So what the AEDC letter is requesting is for council to look at this maybe in a broader sense, beyond just what are the physical improvements to the front facades that we have the program keyed to now. And we've outlined a couple of options. We really put this out here as a discussion point for council to try and understand if there are different goals or broader goals in addition to what we are already doing downtown. And we're really going to be here to respond to any questions or discuss this in the detail that you want. But what we tried to outline in your options is you could take the request from the AEDC and look more at any kind of improvement that adds value being eligible for an incentive. So what that would mean, and under those options, would be if there's no exterior changes to the building, but you repurpose the interior to add value, that would still be eligible for abatement. Right now, that is not the case. You must have an exterior improvement to go along with an interior improvement. Another type of change you could consider is maybe looking at adjusting the types of uses. If you have targeted uses that you want to see in the downtown, that's something that could be worked into criteria. For example, one thing that we brought up was that currently residential uses, that classification is not eligible for abatement. So if you were to add apartments on a second floor of a building, you're likely adding value, but that residential component cannot be abated for tax value. Only commercial valuations can be abated. And that's kind of significant because in the recent tax code changes, assessors now must split residential from commercial valuations. In the older times, assessors didn't split values for buildings based on uses. It had to be one thing or another. And in some cases, maybe a mixed-use residential building could have been classified as commercial or vice versa. But now it's very clear that the assessor must deal with both a commercial and a residential component to the value of a building. So that's something that could be adjusted in the criteria if that's of interest to the council. The other issues about tax abatement schedules, we have no real concerns about what the schedule is. That's really a council question. If you think there's extra value or extra incentive in changing from a 3 to having the 5 and the 10-year options available as well. We didn't really feel like that was a driving issue for the downtown, so that would probably be a companion change to anything that does come about. But as we looked at this in a little bit more detail, I think our number one concern that we came up with is if we do change the incentive program, we want to make sure we're not incenting indirectly the demolition of historic buildings downtown. As I pointed out in the report, our zoning is very broad and lax in downtown in terms of what it expects for how improvements are done. And there's no historic, although there's an historic district, there's no protections in the historic district about historic buildings. So we want to make sure that right now we're incenting improvements to existing buildings with our program, that if we broaden the program, we're not doing the opposite and now undermining the integrity of our historic buildings. So if council does go the route of adding more options and more eligibility, staff is very concerned that we include some protections here about how existing buildings are not demolished and using that incentive to rebuild into bigger buildings that were not intended to be that way from other council goals that we think we have for downtown. So with that, I think we want to hear what council's interests are, and we can respond to how that might affect changes to the eligibility. You would not be making any final decisions tonight. You'd be giving direction if you want us to prepare amendments and bring them back to the city council. All in all, I think there are probably some combinations of changes. If there's goals for other investments to occur in downtown that could be pieced together. In general, I do think physical improvements are valuable in downtown, but I can understand where if a building already has those improvements, that there's maybe an incentive or a desire to add other commercial uses to that area that might also be beneficial. So with that, I'll take questions.
Questions?
Kelly, I want to go back to the commercial versus residential use. Can you explain that again? Are we currently not covering residential improvements? Is that right?
Correct. Residential is not an eligible use to receive tax abatement. So even if you have commercial on the ground floor and you have residential above, you cannot get abatement because you have residential use on the property.
That seems odd to me, in that we're trying to encourage people to live downtown, which means we need to be working on the means to create upper floor housing in the downtown area. My main concerns on this are that we close that loophole for demolition. I don't want to see historic buildings demolished, and that we make it possible to do interior improvements that will ensure the integrity of the structure of buildings. I think we have seen down on the east end of Main Street what can happen when interior changes are made that tragically impact the exterior of a building, almost causing the facade to fall off. So facade improvements are fine, but if the building integrity is damaged, the facade is not going to save the building. And so those are my thoughts on it. I'd like to hear from others on council.
So Kelly, what are the historic buildings? How do we know when a building is historic that's has value that way?
So within the historic district, the inventory identifies which buildings are considered contributors. Those are the ones that we would say are historic. And then there's other buildings that don't meet the historic evaluation criteria. And although they might be in the district, they themselves are not historic. So we have an inventory as a city of what we consider that. But that is a small set of downtown. That is really about 3 blocks of Main Street. It is not the whole downtown is not an historic district.
So is it possible to easily describe the boundaries of that area?
Of the district?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's essentially from south of 5th Street to the railroad tracks. So the south side of 5th Street, not the north side. And then from Duff, I believe, to Burnett, I believe is where.
I apologize. I didn't ask the question well. Which of the areas that have historic structures that might be a point of concern for the council?
Well, there's a couple dozen of them within that area I just talked about.
Okay.
The broader downtown goes all the way from Wheatsfield over to South Duff, and then from 6th Street south to the railroad track. So
Right.
downtown is much broader than those 3-ish blocks where the historic resources are.
So would you say the historic properties are half the properties there, a minority? I mean, is there, I don't really understand.
I mean, in the district, they're well over 50%. In the broader downtown, maybe it's about 50%. So in a district, typically you have to have roughly 80% of properties be contributing to be eligible to be a district. So it's most likely that within the district itself, it's closer to 80%.
And so one more question on this. So if someone had a historic building and the cost of rehabilitation could not be justified and they needed to tear the building down and start over, this wouldn't preclude them from doing that. This is just saying they wouldn't get tax incentives to do that.
Right. So in the zoning ordinance, we have no prohibition on demolition at this point in time. So anybody can tear down any building in downtown with no discretionary review. So this is just whether you're incenting that financially to occur.
I haven't received any input from business owners on this. I don't know if anyone on council has. Could you describe what's been our effort to receive input from the stakeholders who are downtown?
As a referral, we have not done that at all, because usually we just bring to you a snapshot of the issue and then get direction on whether it's something that warrants more time by staff.
So this is really just the first step in the process. We're going to kick the ball around tonight, and then we're going to go back out to the community and receive feedback to see if we're screwing this up too badly.
Yeah. So we need to understand there's a lot of options here. So we need to understand what your priorities are before we could really spend.
I struggled with
effort
this
on
one
that.
just because I kept thinking about the law of unintended consequences and you're trying to anticipate with these different approaches what could go wrong. And so that was hard for me to do that with this.
I think in this case, for me, because you already have a program that's focused on exterior improvements, that's kind of the litmus test of what you should be considering is if that's important to the city, and if you change the program, are you undermining that goal in pursuit of a different goal? And maybe that's on purpose, and that's fine, but just don't have the unintended consequence of leaving one of the prior goals behind unless you really mean to leave that behind. Mm-hmm. And then demolition's a more extreme version of whether you're doing facade work or not.
And my final question is, I didn't see anything in here about the time frame. Are there any time pressures on us that we need to resolve this in a certain window of time?
It wasn't indicated in the letter, so I wouldn't know that if there was something.
I think we've had indication there were some people moving ahead with projects who would like to have this resolved as soon as possible.
Okay, that's great.
So
Thanks.
typically, just from an urban revite schedule, you have to apply for the abatement within 2 years of the improvement being done. And you have a window that you have to apply by January 31st of that following year to be able to have council approve it and then forward that to the city assessor so it gets translated into your tax bills.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's kind of how it generally works.
Just as a point of clarification, you described an area where the historic buildings are at, but the URA is actually much larger.
Yeah. So the URA, again, it stretches from Wheatsfield all the way back over to Duff, 6 to the railroad tracks. And then the historic district's the smaller component.
I'm just looking at the map, and also it goes along Kellogg.
Yeah, so
east and
back
west side of Kellogg.
Right. So before we created downtown gateway zoning, the thought philosophy was about 10 plus years ago was to think of Kellogg as a Main Street area. So it does apply there as well.
Okay, thank you. So there's quite a few buildings that would not be necessarily historic, but would benefit from. They could be demolished for sake of discussion and rebuilds and not violate the intent of what you were just talking about in terms, or Gloria's talking about essentially. Is that right? Because they're not historic.
Well, even if they are historic, you're saying if we created a criteria that a historic building could not be demolished?
Right.
Yes. If we went that route, I think the urban revite criteria would have to be really clear about what inventory you're saying.
Correct.
Applies to those buildings.
So yeah, that's what Tim was getting at. How do you define a historic building? And which
So
one?
the question would be for us, if we go that route, I only have an approved inventory for a select area of downtown. I think you would want to see if you need to look on 5th Street and some other older properties that are north of Main Street, basically, or possibly even south on Kellogg, to see if there's other properties that should be included in that idea.
I think that relates a little bit to the other question I was going to ask, which was in number 3, there's a reference to a building having a compliant historic facade. Compliant with what? Our guidelines for a facade improvement grant?
Yeah, so in our facade program, there's 2 types of facades. There's historic facades, which really means it's the traditional storefront look.
Mhm.
So that's where you have in the plate glass storefront windows, the entryway, awnings, transoms, all that stuff that you normally see as facade grants. And then you have other facades, which is essentially a modern building that doesn't fit the period of significance of when the storefront style was what we're going after. So you could be either, an historic would be that storefront version, an other facade could be any type of facade that's just not that commercial storefront style that meets other guidelines that we have.
I'm trying to think of examples so that I can get a handle on this, because I can think of buildings downtown that I don't know that they necessarily fit the guidelines, but they are historic buildings that may not be on the inventory because they're outside the downtown survey area.
So right, so there's going to be a couple of layers here because of the different areas and different types of buildings that are throughout downtown. I think one good example of kind of how the facade program worked, and it's not an historic facade, so this is why I guess I bring this up. So Wheatsfield, when they first moved into that building, they received a facade grant to make some improvements to that building to make it a little bit nicer from a commercial aesthetic perspective. So they got a facade grant from the city to do that. By adding those other features to the building, it would have made them eligible to ask for tax abatement. And then later on, they got a second grant when they did the remodeling towards Northwestern. And again, they had to add features to the building that are historic, or not historic, but our facade grants required for other facades. If you did not have the tie to physical improvements, just the act of the grocery store moving into that building and the internal improvements they made, if the assessor said that property became more valuable, if you did not have the facade requirements, they would have been eligible for tax abatement. And that's kind of what we're talking about is, do you want someone to have a use, be able to go into any existing building and make no exterior changes and then still be eligible for tax abatement because you want to support that use more than you want to support the building?
So let me give you an example and see whether this makes sense to you. What I'm thinking of is something like the Octagon building, which has most of its historic fabric intact, but it's got some window infill that's not historic. So would a building like that didn't want to do any facade improvements be eligible under something like option number 3?
If the building was compliant, I would say yes, because I believe that their facade, even if there's some features that are not 100% compliant, I think the facade in its totality is probably compliant with the design guidelines. Then yes, internal renovations that improved or caused your value to go up, then under option 3, yes, you could get abatement for that.
I think that goes back again to the definition of what's a compliant historic facade. That's not clearly defined. For example, to one person, it might mean every window has to be fully in a masonry opening, whereas what I just heard Kelly say, which I'm not disagreeing with, but a window which is smaller in size than masonry opening and has some kind of infill above it, well, is that compliant? Maybe it is in one person's opinion, and in someone else's it doesn't. So I think that's where it's going to be important to tease out. Council needs to work with staff in terms of giving some direction on to what extent does compliant mean exactly as it was initially built.
Yeah, and that's where today they would have to repair that or replace that filled in window to be eligible. So that right now the criteria is making you bring it into compliance versus if we're saying no compliance is required. I would 100% agree. It would have to be established black and white objective criteria. Either it's 100% compliant or what is not expected of you to be eligible.
Yeah, there comes a point too where a building owner may say, I have more need inside to repair structural needs and other things. I'd rather invest in that and raise the value that way than going out and tearing out windows that may be 15 years old, but happen to have a little bit of an infill in there. I think it's just the devil's in the details here.
Mhm.
And
Well-
so I think it's just good to talk about that. If not tonight, going forward, if you want to pursue after this, is to what level is the expectation from council, you know? And the other question I have is that, what if you had a building like the one on East Main Street, that what if it had such significant interior decay or alteration that the building owner said, I'm going to tear this down and build a new one, but make the facade to be mirror what was there. It may not be the original brick, but in terms of, are we looking for the appearance, or are we looking for the fact that it's actually original materials, essentially? It's another thing to kind of parse through and figure out. I know that there's value in preference probably is exactly the same building and leaving it and repairing it, but sometimes labor becomes so expensive and it becomes impractical to do that because of the construction techniques.
I would just remind you, Mayor, that we are undergoing our climate action planning, and demolition is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases in urban areas. So,
and I would remind you that from my years of experience, I also understand from a business owner and from an
Yep.
architect and engineer that there's times where you say, it's not worth it. So we're talking about the fact is they could still destroy it. It's just one of those, is there going to be tax abatement provided?
right. No, and I think that's what's important. I don't want us incentivizing
Demolition.
that. And I absolutely agree that the definition of a compliant facade would have to be explored, because if we think about that building down on the east end of Main Street, I don't know why they would want to make any changes to that facade, but the interior and keeping the facade on the building becomes a significant issue for the integrity of Main Street and the integrity of that building. And so in that case, telling them you have to make cosmetic changes is kind of a lipstick on a pig move, when the pig needs significant structural improvement, which I believe is being done, and I'm glad to hear that.
So structural improvements rarely increase your taxable value. That's essentially maintenance. So that there's a difference there about what you might need to invest in your building just to keep its integrity. It doesn't mean that the assessor is going to say, "Oh, you spent $20,000 on this. Your property is already $20,000 more valuable." That is not how we've seen it occur downtown. So I wouldn't say they're the same thing. I did want to bring this up because I kind of cut the historic district off at Burnett, and it does go to Clark. So way over 80% of the properties are considering contributors to the historic district. Now, just because you're contributing does not mean your facade is 100% compliant with the historic guidelines, because there's a measurement of integrity that goes into historic review, and it's not perfection. That's not the standard. But it does have to have its essential character defining features. So this map is the contributors. It does not mean all the facades are 100% compliant, but it's significant in downtown, in this part of downtown.
And I think one of the other issues about compliance is typically there's a recognition that a building can still be considered historic and have historic integrity if whatever has been done to it can be undone easily. So like windows that are filling in the spaces that you can remove, restore that window opening again, and it's not
It can
permanent.
be that way. I wouldn't say it's a given that an evaluator would reach that conclusion all the time. But yes, it's possible.
Okay, any further questions, comments?
One more. Could you help us think through what is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to achieve here? That'd be really helpful if we could sort of understand that.
I think that's the question for the council.
Yeah.
Right. Like right now, the goal for the city of Ames is to support facade improvements downtown.
Right.
That's the only goal we have, is to make facades more attractive and match an aesthetic that we expect through our facade program. So the question I think the ADC letter is bringing up is, do you have broader goals for particular uses to be downtown, to have other types of investments be eligible, or do you want to incent other types of uses or activities downtown? That's a question for the council.
And decouple the facade program from the tax abatement, and also having 3, 5, and 10-year options for tax.
So So I would say if I would ask you to discuss first what your goals are, and then see if they're related to physical improvements. And I think the schedule is the least of significant issue on the table.
All right, let's open up public input, and then we'll continue the conversation and discussion and goals. Does anyone want to address council on this item tonight?
Good evening, Dylan Klein with the Ames Economic Development Commission. And I just want to thank you for the robust conversation around the letter that was issued to council. As I've been thinking about this, so just want to talk a little bit about the initial intent as we've been exploring projects in downtown and looking at abatement programs. The facade grant program and the tax abatement program are both valuable tools for economic development, but as has been highlighted in the conversation, aren't always useful in conjunction with one another. One situation that hasn't been maybe discussed as much is a building that has excellent integrity already and already meets the criteria is we have a beautiful downtown, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And there are many buildings that just don't qualify for the program because they're already in compliance with the facade. There's nothing that needs to be done, and so those facilities are excluded from the tax abatement program for interior improvements just because they're in good condition. And so as you've already highlighted several of the other scenarios where this program in its current state doesn't help the goal of incentivizing development of housing and of amenities downtown to attract people to visit and live in the downtown area. So we just wanted to highlight this, open up to a conversation of how this can be improved to meet the goals of council, and just give the opportunity to take advantage of the opportunities that downtown Ames is just primed to take advantage of. And so, yeah, I think another thing that came up in the conversation that I just wanted to highlight as well is balancing that historic detail versus creating an amenity for downtown, and parsing out what qualifies as a compliant historic building, and not getting so into the details that we are missing out on an improvement or an amenity that could come to downtown and really enhance the enjoyment of the downtown area more than a minute detail of a historic building where most folks wouldn't even notice a window set in a not totally historic way like the Octagon. But if that space could be, it's already a great space, but if for some reason that space would be eligible for another amenity, that would be appreciated more. So if the program could be used for flexibility in that way. So I just mostly want to say I appreciate the staff's thorough analysis of the history of this program, and putting forth the options and spelling those out really clearly. And thank you also, council, for your robust discussion on this and your intent to continue the conversation and really make a wise judgment on this. Thank you.
Dylan, does AEDC have a stance on the options?
I have a personal opinion, but as an organization, I would say we don't have a stance. I think our stance is to increase the flexibility of the program to encompass more revitalization and amenities downtown, while also preserving the integrity of the historic nature of downtown. And it's a challenging question to determine what is historic and what is just old, and what is worth spending dollars on to retain, and what is worth what types of structures are worth possibly demolishing and building new. So and also not wanting to have unintended consequences, as Tim mentioned, to think through how a program can be used down the road and not to incentivize things that that we're not intending to. So I would say that our organization does not have a formal stance on this. I would think a combination of 3 and 4 would be good, but I think that as you've already indicated, more discussion is needed to really parse out the details.
Thank you, Dylan.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Chris Nelson, 239 South Bell Avenue, here in Ames. And I think Dylan hit a lot of the high points on this. I think in looking at this, there is a lot to unpack. Nice job, Kelly, with the staff report and kind of explaining some of those options, because you do want to get this right. And so in reading through this, I think, like Dylan said, a combination of 3 and 4 seems to probably make sense. It incorporates if the building has a compliant facade, that would be eligible. If they want to improve the facade, currently it's eligible, so that would remain the same. If you do decide to target a particular industry or group of companies, that could very well make sense downtown too. The last piece that I wanted to kind of expand upon was just the tearing down and the existence of vacant lots downtown. You had the urban revite, or not the, it was the map with the contributing versus non-contributing things there. So I think this is maybe something to think through. And one thing that I would probably look at is there appear to be several contributing addresses there that are parking lots. So might want to look at that if you use that as a criteria for deciding whether or not abatement would apply or not comply. Because I do believe that there's probably options for abatement in the downtown area where there are buildings or there are vacant lots. A vacant lot would probably make sense to try to figure out something to do with. So between those 3 things, I think that there probably is a pretty good framework for coming up with a solution downtown. So thank you for your consideration and your discussion on this one.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. All right, so I think the points been brought up. What are the goals? That's probably a good place to start. Might help narrow down the options.
I mean, I think there's some low hanging fruit. I like the idea of giving options of the 5 and 10 year. I can't imagine that would be controversial. And so, do you want this in should we do this in just separate motions?
That's fine.
So Kelly, help me out here. But I would move that we modify the existing urban renewal program to offer 5 and 10 year abatement schedules in the revised program.
In addition to the 3 year.
Correct. Yeah.
Second.
And just a point of clarification, using the same guidelines that are currently in place for other 3, 5, and 10 year.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Carried. All right. How about the discussion regarding decoupling? Just point of clarification, Kayla. I think that both Dylan's letter and the staff report stipulated that in order to get tax abatement, you actually have to do facade work. Is that correct?
The current criteria require facade work to happen.
Pardon?
Yeah, the current criteria require you must have done something on the exterior of the building compliant with the facade guidelines
In order to get the tax abatement.
in order to be eligible. So you must do something exterior along with whatever else you're doing. That's the current criteria.
So would another goal be to decouple those two so a property owner could apply for tax abatement without meeting the compliance with facade requirements? Is that right?
So that would be option one, where you just remove any physical requirements, aesthetic requirements from the project, and just say if it's an improvement, you're eligible for abatement. And then
But what I was trying to do is stay at a higher level and to say as a goal, this council has a goal to try and incentivize redevelopment or improvements that does not require facade work. Because I think if you can,
so
get
I
the
wouldn't call
goals,
that
then you can-
redevelopment. So I would keep that in the repurposing or rehabilitation category. Redevelopment, commonly when we're removing the building or taking something significantly away. So I think if that's, I would draw a line between those two. And if the purpose is rehab, that's a lot different than redevelopment.
Thank you.
So I think this is a hard one. So I've always been supportive of the facade grant program because I believe that it was fair that public dollars be used in projects that benefit the downtown area, and certainly the exterior of the buildings, I think has contributed that. And I think in practice, the program has been an enormous success. I think the community really says, both in Campus Town and particularly downtown, it's worked. This has been sort of a conversation that has been eventually going to happen because we're running out of properties to do these facade grants on. We've seen fewer and fewer property owners apply for this. And so, but I think this is trickier because to what degree should public dollars be supporting the rehabilitation of my building on the inside? So what's the public good that we get for that? And so when someone goes to buy a building, they have an inspection, they try to have an understanding of what the capital costs are going to be. And that's baked into the purchase price. By putting this in place, if we were to further incentivize these things, we're going to be using public dollars for more private benefit. And I think it's just harder to see the public return on that. But it also affects the way in which people buy these businesses, these buildings, because now they can get these abatements. So those are my thoughts on it. I just think this piece is harder.
Some of the things you said, Tim, made me think that maybe we need to clarify, first of all, that decoupling the facade grant from the urban revitalization area does not mean we do away with the facade grant.
Correct.
That it still remains, and if people want to use it and then also do the URA, that it's possible to do both, as opposed to saying that you have to do the historic facade. I think I really appreciated what Dylan said about increasing flexibility of the program while maintaining the historic character of the downtown. And I think, to me, part of maintaining that character is ensuring that our buildings stay standing. And that doesn't always mean making cosmetic changes to the facade. And so I am in favor of making this more flexible, but I would also be in favor of not incentivizing demolition. And I do think that we have an interest in getting people to live downtown, so I'm not sure why we would want to exclude a residential use from this, since the residential uses downtown are basically commercial uses, in that people are making money off the renting of the apartments. So in that sense, the components of number 4 about specific uses might also be valuable. And so I guess I'm leaning toward saying that option 3 and option 4, somewhere in the middle of those, maybe a combination of those, is where I would be landing for this. And I also wonder, Kelly, can you put up the URA boundaries again, please? Is this a time when we should be looking at cutting South Kellogg off the URA, since we've now got the Gateway District and the Link project and all of that coming into play there? Or is that a separate issue?
It seems like a separate issue, but I agree it's a topic of conversation.
Practically, it's easier to, if to do an ordinance to amend this, I would rather do one ordinance if you're considering removing the properties. Clearly, the west side of Kellogg is not relevant to this any longer. The east side, I guess that's a question for council. But the west side, it doesn't conflict with anything. It doesn't need to change, but it also probably isn't directly related to your goals along Lincoln Way either.
Well, if there's no Rowan or Rachel or Amber, do you have anything you want to share? As we like to try and get this moving into a motion to get some things going.
Yeah. I'm kind of interested in the specific uses, but I think we need a lot more input before kind of heading in that direction, especially from the business owners downtown, because I would hate to kind of change the program to go for more specific uses and then have unintended consequences or create competition with existing businesses where we're trying to incent new ones. So I would want a lot more public input before I would move that direction, but I think it is something that could help revitalize downtown for sure, would be bringing in more specific housing for downtown and possibly entertainment options. Some of those things would be very cool amenities to bring into our downtown. So I'm kind of interested in it, but I want a lot more input before we make the final call.
Thank you. Rowan, anything you want to share? Or?
No, I mean, I think nothing new anyway.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Amber?
Yeah, no.
Nita?
3 and 4, I'm also interested in hearing more.
One thing that Gloria said that I completely agree with, we're never going to have more housing downtown unless we do something different. So there just are very few units that are there. It's very hard to bring them into code compliance. This is the same conversation we've been having as long as I've been at council. So now to what degree we want to incentivize increasing the density, that's going to be a point of tension. We also have a goal of increasing the density of our urban core. And so, but the reality is there just aren't that many housing units down there. But I'm supportive of doing something to work on residential for sure.
So I think you have to be, obviously we're not making a decision tonight. We have to be really careful about that, because if you start to think about what you're incenting, if it is residential, that's the model Campus Town went down, where the residential drove every redevelopment project, not commercial uses. Right. So, and what you just said was very important. It's the density or the intensity that you're incenting in Campus Town. Totally different than what I think our goals are here, but I have no zoning that says that. I need an incentive program that's controlled if you don't really want intense projects to happen. So if we're going to go through this and residential is a goal, we got to make sure it's the residential we really think is the character of downtown that we expect. And if it's intensity like downtown Gateway, we just need to know that, but we don't want to have that happen by accident. I mean, downtown Gateway, we're very intentional as the city. This is where intense projects are going to happen. I don't know that Main Street is where that was supposed to happen, but that's something that you'll have to understand if you change the incentive program, what that could lead to.
Yeah, but I think there's a balance here. So do we, at the end of the day, 10 years from now, do we want to have the same number of really crummy residential down there that we're never going to see improve, right? So this is our opportunities as council to help drive those changes. Do we want to have skyscrapers? Okay, so maybe there's a balance.
Well, in order to accomplish that, though, you're going to require demolition, and demolition is not going to be qualified. So the point is, I think it's basically repurposing existing buildings, second floors or third floors, essentially, for residential versus the density you're seeing in Campus Town, which is basically tearing down stuff and rebuilding it.
Aren't you saying you don't want you want mixed use? In other words, you don't want a total residential unit. If you're going to have residential, one on the second or third floors, is what you're saying. We want commercial on the first floor.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, so downtown is unique. You only require commercial in the front half of a building. All other parts can be residential. So again, in Campus Town, you have a very small 35-foot minimum for commercial, and then everything else is residential above. It's not residential on the front that's the issue.
I would also just add too, I agree with Rachel. Got a good observation. I think that you're already thinking about it, but that is to just limit it to second floor residential entertainment and food. I mean, there's been a really phenomenal growth in terms of really cool retail, downtown. And I think that people are looking for shopping opportunities as well too. So I think that getting input from other people, Ames Main Street, other individuals, maybe there's things that we want to try and incentivize as well too, or allow to come into it. I'm just thinking about the Sheldon Munn for sake of discussion and all of the unique retail that's been brought in there that I think is really attracting more people to downtown. People really appreciate that. Anyway, so is there a motion? Or some direction to staff so we can keep this thing going? And move on to
How
next item?
specific do you want the motion?
I'll ask Kelly.
Kelly.
What does he need from direction from?
I guess I need to know what I need to do next. Am I studying something? Am I doing outreach? Am I studying everything with outreach? I hope not. I'd like to have a little bit of focus.
Well, I think you could give direction first on the options. If there's consensus on option 3 and 4, we know that 3 has to be clarified as far as compliant. And then 4 would be helpful to bring something to the people rather than start from scratch. So I've heard things like second or higher floor residential, entertainment, and food. That'll be a good starting for the discussion. People might want to add to it, or they want to reduce that number.
Can I follow up on that? So I heard, so right now, entertainment, retail, office are all eligible to receive abatement.
Didn't say office. Yeah,
but your option 4 says exclude.
So
trade and
option
office.
4 was trying to say, do you want to narrow your
Yes,
focus
right.
as
That's
incentive?
right.
So I just want, because I also heard people say retail is important. So that
I'm just
particular
saying,
option would
I'm just
stop
going
that.
strictly by your option 4 says exclude trade and office uses. If it was to say pursue option 3 and 4, then all of a sudden it's very limiting. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to
just trying to tease it out with the council too. Yep.
You want retail in there too? You probably don't want office, but I don't know.
Well, okay.
Eventually
So
just everything then.
Yeah, is it targeted or not? Is really
Yeah, it's targeted or
I
not.
think
Do you want to
it would
limit
be
it?
interesting to get feedback on a targeted approach, provided that we don't drag this out forever.
Without suggesting anything, just ask them.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a ton of pushback on just limiting it to residential and entertainment and food, I mean, presumably we would hear that right away, right? And then we can decide if we want to continue to go down that path or expand it a little bit. But I think it would be interesting to start more narrow in the hopes that that might lead to some efficiency and assist some of these projects that are kind of waiting to hear from us and get things moving.
So I would move that staff explore option 3 with the definition of compliant historic facade and the addition of not allowing projects that include demolition, and do some outreach on option 4 to determine the interest of downtown stakeholders in identifying targeted options. Does that
second?
work?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Can we just, is it possible to have that read back?
Did you catch that, Carly? That's a long one. Can you speak loud enough? Can you?
Not really.
Moved by Vetcher that staff explore option 3 with the definition of compliant historic facade and the addition of not allowing projects that allow demolition, and to do outreach on option 4 to gauge interest of downtown stakeholders in identifying targeted options.
Very well done.
So, okay. So with option 3, the intent then is that there is either you're becoming compliant or you have a compliant facade in an existing building, right? To define more for you what that compliant
means.
facade is.
Mhm.
And then is there a goal of targeted uses for downtown? And that would be tied to going into existing buildings again, is what we're talking about. Okay.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
So
but this will be coming back. I mean, my one hesitation, I just want to put a placeholder on this. I think the issue on demolition is I use again the word tricky, because there may be situations where our goals are actually advanced by demolition. So I'm reluctant to suggest that it's a demolition ban is something we'd want to encourage.
We aren't, we're just not going to incentivize it.
But
And that's, to me, that's important given our climate action goals.
But the climate action goals cut both ways. Maybe you have a building that's a terribly energy efficient, and frankly, the best thing for the environment is to tear the thing down and put something up that's more energy efficient. That's not a point of debate. There are much better energy efficient buildings. We're not going to debate it tonight, but I'm not ruling out, at least this council member is not ruling out the public benefit. Again, we're balancing public dollars and public benefit. There may well be public benefit to tearing down a building that needs to come down. So I just want the council just have that intention.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a little bit further into the climate action process, we'll look at some of the existing things that we're doing and reevaluate them in a different light. So
That's fair.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify one thing? You're talking about public outreach. Are you talking about the general public or a meeting with downtown property owners?
Downtown stakeholders, I think, is what I said. right?
Downtown, clarify. So I hope we can do that. Maybe we can help. I think the Chamber of Commerce could help us coordinate that meeting for both those members and non-members, because I think we want to do this in an expeditious way, because I do believe there are potential redevelopment projects out there that we want to move quickly on. So we'll ask them to coordinate a meeting with us. We'll try to get that as soon as possible so we can move ahead quickly.
Is it possible to think about, Susan has done such a nice job in some of the outreach emails she's done, that we would reach out to the community more broadly. So this isn't just the downtown people that we're interested in. Aren't we interested in having feedback broadly from the community?
That's why I tried to clarify what your direction was. I think it was the stakeholder.
The direction was that staff reach out to the downtown stakeholders. Now, if you wanted something else, that would be a different motion.
Well,
I mean, we're trying to get feedback from people who theoretically are going to be investing in downtown, right? That's not probably the general public.
So two things on that. One is the downtown, we're doing this not just for the downtown business owners, we're doing this for the whole community. And so it's their dollars are involved, but also I would like to have their input in terms of the kind of downtown they'd like to see. So it seems like it's a pretty narrow focus. If we focus just on the downtown people, we're going to be in a bit of an echo chamber.
I just think it's really hard to communicate to the general public what a URA is and how
No, that's true.
building demolitions and facades and the definition of historical, like how you put that into bite-sized pieces that the average person understands is very challenging. And I don't know that it's going to produce anything useful to us.
So I think that's fair. Maybe it's sort of on us as council members to reach out to the community and our constituents to get input. But I think you make a good point. This is hard to explain to people.
Okay, let's move on to item 34. North Dayton Industrial Park Urban Renewal Area.
So we recently approved the plat for North Dayton subdivision along with a development agreement that has two conditions in it before the agreement is ineffective. One of them is for the city to approve an urban renewal area, which would then allow for the TIF rebate of approximately $2.9 million to the developer. That dollar amount was based on infrastructure costs that they would incur to build the project. The second condition is upon the developer to final plat this project within 2023. So it's two performance measures. If we approve this tonight, you're setting in motion to go forward with adopting the urban renewal plan. We would come back in December to complete the process with a public hearing and adopt a TIF ordinance at that time. The plan is consistent with that prior development agreement. So if there's any questions, I'd answer those now.
Any questions for Kelly? Open up public input. Does anyone want to address council on this item tonight? Seeing none, close public input. Entertain motion on resolution of necessity to initiate proceedings for creating an urban renewal area.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Is there a motion to refer draft plan to Planning and Zoning Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion appointing Director of Planning and Housing as the city's representative for consultation meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And entertain a motion on resolution setting December 13th, 2022 as date of public hearing for urban renewal plan.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on to item 35, Ansley Subdivision, 3210 Cedar Lane.
So I'll address the first item about Xenia Water Territory, then Benjamin will talk about the project. So the first item, it's our first transfer agreement with Xenia since we adopted the overall master agreement for territory to be served by Xenia and for territory that could be purchased in terms of service rights. We have the final agreement back from Xenia. We had to have some corrections to ensure that the whole project area, so the area that Benjamin just put up, that will become our territory. The developer will be paying for the buyout in phases. We're not involved in the buyout component. They will just interact with Xenia to finish those terms that they have as agreement with Xenia. So we recommend approval of this final agreement to transfer this to Ames.
Any questions on item 35A? Open up public input on 35A. There will be public input also on 35B. Is there any input on 35A, which is the Xenia Rural Water Agreement? Close public input. Entertain a motion and resolution approving the agreement to accept the transfer of approximately 59.7 acres of land for Ansley development from Xenia Rural Water to City of Ames.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay, 35B, resolution regarding preliminary plat.
So Benjamin's going to walk through the project, and I sent you a memo earlier this morning. When he's done with this presentation, I'll just walk you through that memo as well.
Good evening. The property here is Ansley. It was rezoned earlier this year in May to FSRL, residential low density with a planned unit development overlay. There are planned to be 117 single family lots with 5 townhome lots. The property is going to take connection from Cedar Lane and from some extensions of surrounding streets. Cedar Lane, as you can see, there is going to be extended approximately 1,000 feet. North is to the east here. You can see it with north at the top. Cedar Lane will be extended 1,000 feet to Rothway Road, which will be the future road that goes east-west there. The applicant is requesting a waiver of construction of the additional right-of-way for the additional extension of Cedar Lane. You can see there's a 1,500 feet between the end of Cedar Lane and the tip of the property at the south. To the west and to the east, there is property that is owned by Iowa State University or a related affiliate, and it is used for the university for teaching purposes. The applicant is requesting a waiver to construct that additional 1,500 feet due to the fact that the land is owned by the university, controlled by the university, and it is unlikely that it will be developed in the near future unless it is sold. Staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat with the waiver, and I'll let Kelly explain a little bit more about the specifics of the waiver request in his memo.
So alternative one that was presented in the council action form discussed granting a conditional waiver. We recommended that under the premise that in the past, city council has looked at final decisions on waivers at final plat. So preliminary plat sets in motion the developer's options to start doing improvements and to start finaling lots and doing grading. And eventually they come back with smaller additions. And at that time, we have granted waivers along with final plats. After discussing with the applicant, I went back and looked at some other situations that we have looked at waivers, and it appears that we have at times also granted them as a final decision with preliminary plat. So we believe that through your activity of doing it both ways, staff could support doing that final waiver tonight with the preliminary plat. That's the applicant's request. They would then have certainty on that they could proceed with the project design as is. Staff's opinion is that, again, the rationale here is unique in that essentially you have government-owned land that we have no indication is not going to be government land. We all are very cautious, never say never. It's, I think, a lot different to talk about state-owned land than it is to talk about someone's family farm that has no intention of selling. So our rationale is really based on this being government land. And as you can see the point down here, it's surrounded on two sides by ISU land. As you go up Cedar Lane, the only other, again, ISU is the only other owner along Cedar Lane on the west side. So uniquely here, the land ownership is why staff is supporting this. We don't see that ownership really changing throughout the development of this project. So that's why we could support that decision now. If council wanted to extend that out to see if things changed, you could follow alternative one, but staff believes you could also create a new alternative night to approve it with that condition, which is important, that the right-of-way is dedicated and any easements we need for future utility and extensions would also be dedicated in the future. Is there any questions on the waiver process? Okay.
It would seem that given the fact that it's surrounded on the east, west, and even south as being institutional land, could council make it very specific that a waiver is granted because of that situation so that there's not future developers coming in asking for waivers also, because it may not be for sale at that point in time. I'm just trying to think through because it's a very unique situation here where, and it is presumed, I mean, Steve and I have talked to Dr. Winterstein before about whether they should be ever willing to sell, land, and really they're very protective of that because it's learning environments for students and they want to have close access, to it. And they've been actually purchasing land for that. So that the likelihood is remote, but I'm just trying to think through how can this council be protected, but also other councils that you won't have another developer coming and saying, well, gee, you granted this to this person. Why can't we? I'm trying to think how we can do it in a way that's legal, but also unique and also allow this development to proceed because we need it in the community.
Yeah, what you've stated reinforces everything that staff understands about the property and why we're supporting that. That can be clearly put into the resolution. Each waiver in a subdivision isn't a legal precedent. It is a case-by-case situation where you have to make a fact-based determination on each project. So it's not like all of a sudden long extensions of infrastructure are no longer expected, but we can clearly do that. The other thing I would reinforce here is with Plan 2040 just recently being adopted, and as we know, it had growth options that were way beyond 20 years. We had never highlighted this land as being assumed that ISU would turn this over into something else. If we were in other parts of the city, we could fall back to 2040 and also say, hey, look, this is really someday able to be served. There's no reason not to do this right now. But our conversations over the last 5 years have all been that this is going to be state land and stay state land because of that animal science corridor just to the west of here.
So I would agree with the mayor, although it's not a legal precedent. I think for us as staff, it's always good to have a track record to understand congressional intent. So I think the key is that it's surrounded by ISU property. They said state property, but it would be narrow here. We say ISU property. That's the reason we're recommending the waiver.
So just to be clear on this, I'm wondering the parcels directly east where we have a stub of Aurora and a stub of Roth Road, those are privately owned and that's why we have the extensions provided there.
Yes. So we built that into the design from over the last 2 years, saying you had to have stubbed connections to the east. That's also compliant with Ames Plan 2040. Those lands are shown to be able to be developed. And really the Bergesons did a great job of getting everyone out here to voluntarily annex. So even though there's no desire to develop on the east side right now, the Bergesons really brought everybody in together at one time with kind of this vision to see their project go forward and have some connectivity to the east.
All right, open up public input. Anyone want to address council on this item? We'll close public input. Any further discussion? Kelly, you have your memo, which we greatly appreciate sending out to council. Is there just trying to catch the motion, so it's
So I didn't rewrite it into a wholly new alternative. It's really alternative one without B.
bold font.
Yep. So it would be a modification to alternative one. So then it would read: approve the preliminary plat for Ansley subdivision at 3210 Cedar Lane with the waiver for the extension of Cedar Lane and utilities for water and wastewater within the Cedar Lane right-of-way, subject to the following, which would be A, dedication of right-of-way and necessary easements for the sewer extensions. And then you would be leaving off B.
I wonder if there's any way you could put in the motion or the resolution, the surrounded by, the waivers being granted because surrounded by ISU property.
And if you wanted to add that motion to have staff write the resolution to recognize the unique ISU land ownership condition, that could be added. It's not.
Okay. All right.
That's fine.
Can I say so moved? I'll move 1A and ask the staff clarify the supporting rationale of the surrounding Iowa State land
As the reason for the waiver.
as the reason for the waiver.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Very good. Well, we thank you for the vision that you've brought, and as everyone knows, housing is really important in the community, and we thank you for investing in it, and look forward to seeing ground get broken. All right, thank you. All right, moving on to item 36, hearing on Ames City Hall interior updates.
Corey's got it.
Thanks for waiting, Corey. Is there any questions for Corey on this, or you want to highlight anything, Corey?
Just based on the bids, we're recommending rejection. We'll kind of move forward, but kind of smaller projects managed by staff. If you notice, both of the bidders were kind of general contractors. We think we can take over that role and save the money.
It's basically emphasized movie with painting. We'll probably have to find additional funds if we ever want to do the recarpeting, which will come in the future, I think.
Yep, you can see that. That was kind of that alternate one. So we were quite a bit short to do the whole project, but maybe in a few years we could do the whole thing and finish all the painting. We'll finish quite a bit of the painting now.
Alternative 3 is city council will be painning. I was curious about that.
I didn't catch that one in the.
I think we'd have to have a quality check before we would let you.
I think it's the male city council people. I think it's what it is.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
No.
No? Sorry, I withdraw that motion. No, I'm just kidding. All right. All right. Any questions for Corey? Is there a motion to reject all bids and direct staff to work internally with small bid packages to complete the work?
So moved.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Corey. All right, item 37, hearing on Emma McCarthy Lee Park tennis and pickleball court renovation. Sadly, apparently there's no bids, so I need a motion to approve report of no bids and direct staff to modify the plans and or the completion date based on feedback from plan holders with intent to rebid at later date.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, excuse me. I need to open a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this item? I declare the public hearing to be open on this.
No pressure, Chris.
Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Mark, I kind of messed up. We should have had a public hearing on interior updates. Can I go back and? Didn't miss it.
Corey, get back here.
Can I open a public hearing back up on that one? I need some advice. I apologize. I
Move
completely
to
missed it.
reconsider. The
Yeah, why don't you just do a quick motion to reconsider?
Move to reconsider item 36.
Second.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. All right, item 36, declare public hearing on the Ames City Hall interior updates to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council? Hearing none, declare public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion now to reject all bids and direct staff to work internally with small bid packages to complete the work.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, item 38, hearing on the 2022 CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance Report.
Any questions laid out, accomplishments past year by Vanessa?
Any
We have
questions?
to submit it now.
All right. Declare public hearing on the 2022 CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance Report to be open. Anyone want to address council on this topic? Declare public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving the submittal of the city's 2021-2022 CAPER.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Item 39, entertain a motion on second passage of an ordinance amending section 2418 for the boundary of Ames 5th Tax Incremental Financing District, ISU Research Park Phase 3.
Move on second.
Thank you. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Is this the third reading?
Roll call.
Oh,
Oh,
Wait.
never mind. It does-
I want a roll call on the second passage. Second.
Aye.
will be next.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And is there a motion? Is there a motion to suspend council rules for having a third reading and adoption?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Entertain motion and resolution on third passage of ordinance amending section 2418 for the boundary and adoption of ordinance number 4481.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And entertain motion on second passage of ordinance rezoning of 3700 to 5898 East Lincoln Way, 799 Tower Avenue, and 2220 and 420 South Avenue from agricultural A to intensive industrial.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on, disposition of communications to council. We have a number of items tonight. First is a letter from Dan Callahan regarding the annual Run for Roses road race in downtown Ames.
I don't believe any action is required.
Okay. Second was an email from Joe Hansen regarding naming a downtown plaza. I know that council took that into consideration in their resolution earlier tonight. Third is an email from Lebus Brokova regarding safety concern at intersection of Garfield Avenue and Ontario Street.
And refer this to Public Works staff
For memo. For memo.
for a moment.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is email from Linnell Doherty regarding the renaming of the Ames Municipal Airport. It's our interest to consider any action in terms of additional recognition of people at the airport, or just let it lay. Let it lay. Next is an email from Steve Jordison and Paul Swafford. Pedestrian safety concerns and requests for pedestrian activated warning lights at various intersections. Some of these are actually being considered already by Damien.
It's okay if you just say refer to, yep.
I would move we refer this to staff
Okay.
for memo.
Okay.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is a letter from Cindy Hicks regarding developing a potential sister relationship with Podiefo Kosovo and upcoming mayoral visit. And we received notice today, I think it was, Brian, yesterday, that visit has been postponed until next year. Some internal issues came up in Kosovo that precipitated them having to cancel all the mayors coming to Iowa. So Cindy said that they're going to try and get it rescheduled sometime next year. And just for information, what it is, this visit was going to basically be to get to know one another a little bit, find out what their goals are, and then see if there's a good fit. And then it'd be a process of talking through it and bringing it back to council as well too. So anyway, last is a memo from Keith on the aqua programs at Green Hills. And there's really no action on that. That's just one of us for council's information in response to the referral.
I don't know if you want us to send this on to Ms. Kentwan or not, or what it was. The actual letter was written to you. I don't know if anybody shared this with.
I certainly.
Did you share it with?
I know that I know the individual. I'd be happy to share it.
Yeah,
with
okay. Make sure she sees a copy.
I'll take a copy over to her.
Good.
Okay. All right. All right. Council comments. Bryce.
Just a couple things. Once again, thanks so much for coming. What's it been? 2 weeks ago now for the joint meeting. Hearing just speaking with some of the student government members, they really enjoyed their time in the topics that we talked about. I'm going to do a survey amongst the senators and student government members and get some feedback of things that we can change, do differently, keep for next time. And then also, this will be the last time you see me this month. I will be on vacation next week and the week after that. So I will see you all in December.
Very good. Rama?
Nothing for me tonight. Thanks.
Rachel?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Amber?
Nothing
Anything?
for me.
Nothing for me.
So Friday is Veterans Day, and the city will be hosting a program at 11 o'clock in our auditorium. Dwayne Pitcher, our beloved former finance director, will be our featured speaker. So I encourage people to come out and support him. The Ames Chamber, I think it's the high school chorale, will be performing. They are fantastic. And so please consider coming Friday at 11 o'clock at our city auditorium.
All right.
On Friday, there was a kickoff to the Jack Tricentennial celebration at Iowa State, and it was very well attended. I would encourage people to go and look at the new Breaking Barriers sculpture down at the stadium and walk through it. And there's going to be an exciting year of events surrounding this before the centennial next October, which I believe we have city staff working on. So it's been 4 hard years of work for the committee.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Do you want to talk about, just highlight what's going on next week, next Tuesday, or we have a council workshop?
We do. We've got a, Deb is working on a very important document for you. It's turning out to be a lot more complicated than we thought to try to synthesize a very complex issue for you. We're going to try to highlight the recommendations to accomplish our year 2 goals, the interim goal of reaching the 85% reduction by 2030, and then the long-term goal of reaching net zero by 2050. And we've got 6 big moves and 25 action steps. And we're trying to quantify those, but also analyze them according to some other criteria, like the ease of administration of actually implementing the programs, and some of the other issues, the legality of doing some of these things. Do we have the power to actually do the cost of it, how we would fund them, and also, which would be very interesting to look at the amount of carbon per ton that can be reduced for each dollar. So that'll let you be prioritized. Where's the best place to put your money to optimize the carbon reduction? We hope from there that the next step after this will be to start talking about an implementation plan, where we go first. So there won't be any action. You're going to have to really look at this report. I was hoping we get farther along on it. It's pretty complex. We're probably not going to have the ideal report yet. you'll probably have a lot more questions, but it's a complicated issue, but we're kind of excited about it. There's things we think we're going to move ahead with, and we'll start talking about those things. So we got a lot of work to do before Friday when we send it out. So it'll be exciting.
Thank you. The other thing is, last night we had our second community conversation. It was held at the water plant. We had, I don't know, it's probably 20, 25 people come. And we had an associate principal from the high school come and share some really encouraging things they're doing about mental health, but also shared what the status is of mental health at the high school. Our great partners from Iowa State, Aaron Baldwin and Brian Vanderheiden, talked a lot about what's going on on campus. And we had a very exciting presentation about this new program called ARCH. And what it is, it's a EMT and a social worker that goes out on mental health calls or welfare checks. And they've done they started October 11th, and they've already been on, I think, between 35 and 40 calls already. And they've been able to help provide some housing for a homeless person, refer them to the Bridge Home, as well as a variety of other things. So it's very, very exciting. And then we talked about mental health first aid training and ASSIST, which is suicide prevention, and some other diversion. So anyways, it's this, thanks to Susan and to Bill, he was there. All these are being taped, and he's going to be merging them and bringing in the slides as well too, and being posted on the website. And so we're starting to build an archive of information. And Jacob Ludwig, president of student government, was there, and Charlotte, who is involved with students. She's under the health and
Director of Health and Wellness.
Yeah, under the student government leadership. So anyway, our next one will be the end of January. We're going to not do anything in December, obviously, because of the holidays, but also students will be leaving. And then also we're going to wait until the students get back and give them a couple of weeks. So next one's going to be on resiliency. So I'm also excited to announce that we're going to have in April for our civility and conversation, Scott Redeker he's with the Robert D. and Billy Ray Foundation at Drake, is going to come and be one of our speakers. And he specializes in, they do character counts, the character counts you saw in schools, and actually a lot of institutions use that. But he has quite a program on civility in conversation and dialogue and engagement. So anyway, exciting things coming up. So with that.
Mayor?
Yes.
Could I ask the city manager to give us an update on the DEI coordinator hiring?
Sure. We completed, well, Deb can answer this. She's got the numbers. We completed our national search. We've reduced the number down to a certain semifinalists, and Deb reduced it down with HR, reduced down to 7 semifinalists who would. They're now recommending we bring in how many people?
4.
4 will be brought in starting next week.
Yep.
And then we'll interview those individuals, and that person, like we do for a lot of positions, will get exposure to a lot of people in our organization to give feedback. I think we're also trying to get input from the Human Relations Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Will give us some, because we think the person will spend perhaps half the time working with the Human Relations Commission out in the public. And then we'll have to see if we have a candidate that we believe fits our organization, will be compatible with our organization, or if the individual believes that's the case too. So sometimes we have a very successful operation, sometimes interview. Sometimes we say we have to go out for more candidates. But from what I hear, they're pretty excited about the finalists that are coming in, and they're coming in from, I don't know how many from the state of Iowa and how many are outside the state.
There are, I think here, two from the state of Iowa and then 2 who are outside the state. So we'll start interviews next week, and then our last interview is the first week in December.
How many applicants were there?
Total, we had 32.
Oh, great.
And then we phone interviewed 8 and bringing in on site 4.
Great.
We're excited. There'll be a day, almost a day long interview process for the on-site part.
Right. We'll report back when we have a successful recruitment. If we hire somebody.
Entertain motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.